Man, that was so transformational it was such transformation for our faith. Because really, I don't know how you would say it, but it felt like maybe for the first time in our adult lives, we had to trust God in a way we didn't even know was possible.
What is up? My name is Steven, and it is my great honor to welcome you to the Nook Podcast, where the goal will always be to honor God with all that is said, even when the stories get messy. My door is always open to hear from you, and what that looks like here is that you can reach me via email. The address is steven@nookpodcast.com. That address is always in the show notes, along with a link to Buy Me a Coffee, which is a simple and secure way for you to help support this show financially. You can probably imagine that I do incur some costs putting this show together each month, each week, and if this show has added value to your life, I just ask that you prayerfully consider a one-time donation or a recurring monthly gift. Continuing this month-long celebration of adoption and how that looks for a few different people and in different ways, not the least of which being myself. I was adopted as a child and have always been a huge fan of hearing how God puts families together through His amazing gift of adoption. This week, I get to introduce you to my friends Josh and Renae Bradley from Greenville, South Carolina. Their story starts in a fairly familiar way in that they met, fell in love, and got married, and then found themselves in that challenging situation of infertility that we often hear of. Well, that's where their story becomes incredibly special. Choosing to go the way of adoption, their first son, Dawson, was born with a chromosomal condition called trisomy 18. This condition is associated with abnormalities in many parts of the body, such as low birth weight, heart defects, and abnormalities of other organs that develop before birth. Undeterred, Josh and Renee took this boy into their hearts and home. And even with all of the challenges of raising a son who would need near constant care, they would eventually add 3 more children with other special needs. Much the same way that Josh and Renee would have never guessed that they would struggle with infertility, they had no idea how much joy they would derive from raising kids like this. So settle in for this very enlightening conversation with Josh and Renae Bradley. First of all, tell me, just give me a little bit of the overview of Josh and Renae Bradley, how long you guys have been married, and we'll just jump from there.
You the talker.
I'm the talker. Yeah. So Renee and I were married in 1997 and been married this year 25 years in September. And we met in the little town of Greer, South Carolina. Doing what we did down here back then, which is cruising, just driving around, and we would just hang out in parking lots, and that was all we had to do for fun back then.
That's the high life in Greer,
what
huh?
What do you want to do? You want to drive to a different parking lot and look at each other over there? Yeah, that'd be lots of fun. Yeah, so that's exactly what we were doing, and I hopped in the car with her and we rode around a little bit, and the rest is history. We've been together ever since. So, yeah.
Well, then tell me then, how long was it before you started thinking about what the family unit of Josh and Renee might look like?
So I think from the beginning, we knew we wanted to have children. And so, the mama and me, it was just what was there. And I'm like, let's go right now. I'm ready to have kids. Josh was the more level-headed. Let's take a couple years and learn, learn each other, make sure we're not going to kill each other. And, we decided probably 3 years into our marriage that we were ready to go that route. And, Lord had different plans for us because we did all the infertility stuff, every step you could go to up until the in vitro, and nothing was ever successful. So we knew, God had a different plan for us. And I had always been really closed off to adoption because I was like, first of all, it's extremely expensive. And secondly, it was me giving up any hope of having children of my own. And so at that point, I didn't understand these children that need a home can still be my own also. And now, I can't even imagine what I would do without them. But at that point was when a little girl actually came into our life, and the mom really kind of just left her, abandoned her, and the grandmother stepped in, and it was like God I always say God smacks me in the face with each one of my kids of, okay, here, dummy, you can do this. But it was God saying, okay, not everybody has a grandmother that can step in. So I was like, okay, well, we'll do this. And so, God gave us Dawson. And with Dawson, I was like, I could never do foster care. And that might be jumping ahead a little bit, but with each one of the kids, it was again, okay, boom, you stupid. Here, you can do this, Renee. God's got this plan in your heart and you can do it. And I said, I could never do foster care. And when we were given Dawson, we had no plan that he was going to be sick or have a terminal illness. And it was like, how long are you going to love him? As long as you have him, you're going to love him as long as you have him until you have to give him back to me. And so that was my biggest fear with foster care, is that I couldn't love him and then give him back. But once again, so that's what got us to the point of, God smacking me in the head saying, okay, you can do this. And this is the plan I have for you.
So foster care was foster care your doorway into it, or how did that part of it begin?
It kind of worked the other way. So, we had moved out to Memphis, Tennessee, to do some ministry out there with a really good friends of ours. And while we were there, I was speaking to a bunch of teenagers on a Wednesday night and telling a little bit about Renee and my story. By that time, we wanted to have children. It would have been 7 years or so. We had been married, 7 or 8 years we've been married. I've never been able to have children. And I talked a little bit about that. One of the moms of one of the kids who were there, older teenager, one of his mom, called us a week or so later saying, hey, my son met this young girl, and she's pregnant, and she's really looking for someone that would want to raise her baby. She does not feel like that's something that she can do. Oh, wow. And we're like, oh my gosh, we had considered that idea beforehand. Yeah. And even had put a little book together about how cool we are and all of our little family in our house. And it was like this little, what do they call the book?
Profile.
It was like this little profile. Yeah, just telling about our family. So we put that together. And then sure enough, we met her on a weekend.
Friday.
And it was like, everything felt right about it. And she was about 5 months pregnant at the time. So we started taking her to all of her doctor's visits, and she moved in with some really dear friends of ours, and they really cared for her through that process, and in a way that we really couldn't at the time. And man, it was just incredible. And then all of a sudden, November comes along, which was the year Katrina hit. Katrina in New Orleans. And so, at the time we were in Memphis, so there's a lot of folks from New Orleans had come up, a lot of folks displaced where we were. So we were in November, and he's born. And I still remember now looking in the window at him breathing under this little oxygen tent. And I'm like, oh, look at the cute little baby. But now knowing what we know medically, we would have passed out in the hallway by going, what in the world's going on with this child? Like, this is dangerous. And, he went immediately into the neonatal intensive care unit, and we spent a few weeks there, and he just kept getting better. And that was the amazing part about this, and he came home, and we were there in Memphis, and we brought him home, and they tell us, well, he's not going to survive. And we're like, yeah, it doesn't seem like he will. And, we were there for about 4 more months, and we moved back to our hometown, Greenville, Spartanburg area here in South Carolina. And we really just moved here because we couldn't imagine burying him in another state away from where we were going to spend our time. And that was really heavy. And I remember those moments, a lot of those moments that Renee and I spent just for the first time just imagining like this gift that we were going to have. And then we had to come to terms with the fact we just weren't going to have it very long.
Yeah.
And man, that was so transformational it was such transformation for our faith. Because really, I don't know how you would say it, but it felt like maybe for the first time in our adult lives, we had to trust God in a way we didn't even know was possible, with life and death. Well, as he's getting better, Renee and I are learning a set of skills because of all Dawson's medical needs. When I say Renee and I mainly mean Renee. But we're learning a set of skills that most people just don't have. And so our very first baby we bring home is on oxygen and a heart monitor, has a terminal illness, and we're like, well, don't all babies sleep on monitors at night, and then you have to listen for alarms going off? And so that gave us a certain set of skills. I always feel like Liam Neeson when I mention that, by the way.
How do you not?
I've spent a lifetime developing a certain set of skills. And so that gave us those skills. And, Dawson's growing. He has heart surgery. Steve, that surgery happened when we were there with you, when you and I were working on a church staff together. Yep. That surgery happened at that time. And then it wasn't very much longer. Renee's like, we should think about expanding our family. And Renee comes into contact with an organization here in Greenville that did medically fragile foster care.
Oh, wow.
And so we're like, wow, that's something we could probably do, because we're probably not going to have any, like biological children. And our thoughts were like, who's lining up to like adopt or take in medically fragile children? This process will probably be a lot easier, to go through. And so that's exactly what happened. We got a call the Christmas of 2007. I'm pretty sure was it December 19th?
It was, yes.
It was December 19th. Renee calls me. I'm at work at the church. You and I worked together at the time. I'm at work and she's like, hey, I'm bringing a baby home today. All right.
By the way,
we've got an extra room. So are you
got us approved that morning?
Yeah.
Got our papers signed, and that afternoon I picked him up from the hospital.
Oh,
so I go to work in the morning, and by the time I get home, there's a baby here.
We got 2 kids.
Yeah, we have 2. We go from 1 to 2 overnight. And it was just crazy. And it was, he came home on oxygen and heart monitor. He was born at 23 weeks. He's one of the youngest children to ever survive. Now looking at him, he's 14 and, completely, not really dependent on any kind of like medical. He doesn't have any type of medical issues or anything other than he wears glasses. He's got ADHD, which kind of identifies like 60% of the population.
That's me.
Yeah, exactly. So, but in his young years, when he was 1 and 2, we had a lot of therapies and different things to kind of catch him up. And I've always said, like, as Renee told you earlier, she had this real desire to be a mom. And like, we just didn't really realize like what God was crafting and growing in her and how we'd be able to leverage that. Like, I think she's like a super mom. It's like, and I mean that like our kids are alive and thriving because God's gifted her to care for things with extraordinary needs. And so that's kind of the story of how we got involved in foster care. Well, we started in foster care, Steve, and they say, well, hey, do you want to keep these kids? And we're like, well, okay, that sounds like a great plan. And so we were just looking at this yesterday. DJ's adoption, his gotcha day was just yesterday. And so it was just incredible to go back and look at these pictures of how little he was, and there we are holding him, and now to look at him now and to think, what God has done with our family. And then, a few years later, we get another call. I go to work again, and it was 2 days on this one that we had to wait until we brought him home. But she's like, hey, we need to go to the hospital this afternoon to visit this little boy that they're going to send home with us. Carson was born, and he had been in the hospital for about 3 months. He was born with cystic fibrosis, and he's still living with that now. And it's just I mean, it was crazy. We walk into that little hospital room, and that little dude, he's 3 months old, and he looks up and smiles at us like with this big as grin. And we were like, all right, we got to make space for this one. Like, okay, let's take him home. Same kind of thing, we end up adopting him. Actually, it was less time. It was a couple of years. It was less than a year with him. That's right. She remembers these specific important things. So
we adopted him on the day we brought DJ home, December the 19th.
Hey, that's right. Carson's Gotcha Day was the same day as DJ's day we brought him home. Yeah. So, and then we rounded out the family with a little girl who's we raised all boys, and then we have a little girl, and she's full of all the little girl things, which Renee is categorizing as drama. That's not coming from me. But
she has daddy wrapped.
100%. It's funny now. Like, listening to the two of them, it sounds like siblings arguing in the mornings, like when we're getting dressed, and I'm just laughing.
Oh, sure.
And I'm like, I'm going to pay for this. I'm definitely going to pay for this. But yeah, with her, she came home through foster care, and she had some neglect that she had survived as a really young child. She's the only one of our 4 children that came through foster care and adoption to where she had been in her home for a while. She was there for 6 months before she came to us.
Oh, wow.
So that's it. Dawson is now 16 years old. And we just got back from an appointment with him this morning, and he's doing great. And he was smiling and happy this morning. He's got a ton of physical limitations and medical complications, but through all those things, we're I believe thriving.
16-year-old living with trisomy 18. That's pretty explanation enough.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible to think. DJ outgrew most of the things he dealt with as a young child. His adoption was final when he was 3. Carson is living and thriving with cystic fibrosis, and Huntley is doing very well as she's worked through what it might mean for a child to be neglected by a parent at that young age.
Wow.
The emotional challenges with her have been the real challenge with her. And so the guys have kind of given us a pretty great support network, and stretching us with new skills that are, if somebody stops breathing, I know exactly what to do for that, right? You just make them start breathing again. Right. But when there's an emotional wound, the investment is much more complex.
I would imagine,
just as valuable and necessary. So that's a little bit about how we got to where we are. We're the parents of 4 adopted children. So,
well, Renee, you just touched on trisomy 18, and I wanted to at least drill down a little bit there, because I don't think that that's just something that comes immediately to mind for people. And since that's where you two started with this adoptive journey, give us some insights into, first of all, that condition, and then maybe just a bit of a story arc as to where you guys have been, where you came from, where you are now with Dawson, and all that has been involved there.
Yeah, absolutely. So Dawson was born with a genetic disorder known as trisomy 18. 90% of the children that are diagnosed with that in utero do not even make it to birth. Only 10% of children that make it to birth make it to their first birthday. So that he, that's the statistics we were told from the beginning, that, basically you're going home to plan a funeral, not to plan even a first birthday.
Oh, wow.
So Dawson had 3 holes in his heart at birth, which is very typical for a diagnosis of trisomy 18, and many more abnormalities, but the heart being the biggest thing. And, 16 years down the road now, we're seeing that a lot of the children's lifespan is on the early intervention of what you can get for the kiddos. So Dawson was born. The cardiologist said, some really unkind things about the existence of Dawson's life in general. And we were, that's not us. We believe in a higher power that's, Jesus has got him right in his hand, and whether he's going to live 2 days or if he's going to live thousands of days, that's his plan. And that was planned before he ever came to the earth. So we met and found out about an organization that, there were kids that were 40 years old living with this diagnosis. So we're like, okay, we're those stubborn adoptive parents that, okay, we're going to fight for this kid. We're going to do what we need to do. And so we were really aggressive with his care. At a month, he had his first cardiac repair. And then we brought him home to Greenville. He was having some breathing issues, and we took him to Greenville. We fought for him there. All the things that were totally typical for a trisomy 18 diagnosis, Dawson was getting. He got a trach, he got a G-tube, all these different medical things. But he continued to thrive. He continued to fight. Everything you would do, it wasn't regression. You may have brief regressions, but overall it was, hey, I can do this. I can do this. I'm living with this. And so he would continue all this different things. I mean, he's now had 2 cardiac repairs. He had his first one at a month and the second one to repair his holes at 18 months. Got a trach when he was 6 months. They said that'll never come out. At 22 months, his trach came out. So we're like, wait a minute, all this stuff you're reading online about this, that's not happening. He's keeping doing all this stuff. What do we do? And so we just continued to, get on board with Dawson's schedule. And who would have ever thought that in May of last year, his spine had gotten so curved. The scoliosis was so bad, it was pressing his lung together, and he was still fighting through it, not needing oxygen at all. But we decided to do the spine repair, and who would have thought? This is only the third time he had been on a ventilator, where he came out of the operating room on a ventilator. And a day later, he comes off and he does amazing. And where we were having to do a thing, it's called a CPT vest. It shakes his lungs to keep things moving so he doesn't settle and get sick. He hasn't had that, but he was dependent on it 2 to 3 times a day. Now he's done it twice in almost a year. So, and he survived an 8-hour surgery that everybody said he wouldn't survive, and doing phenomenal. Like, he's amazing.
It's incredible. Early on, Steve, I remember being conflicted about exactly how to pray for him. It was really difficult to think about, like, God, what am I supposed to pray? Am I supposed to pray that you make, like, the end easy? Am I supposed to pray that you heal him? Like, what am I supposed to pray? And I remember talking with a very special friend, it's very special friends of ours. And he said something to me. He's like, Josh, you need to pray that your family would be exactly what God created it to be. And God put this prayer on my heart, and he put it on Renee's heart. And we still pray this prayer over Dawson now. And here it is. God, we pray that you would extend his days. And he's been extending those days for 16 years. And there's hardly a night that we put him to bed. When I say we, I typically mean Renee puts him to bed. And there's hardly a night that I don't think about what it might feel like for all these parents who have their children in a NICU, in a PICU, or parents who no longer have their children, and how grateful we are to have this time with him every single day. Like, it's incredible. Like, so many people think about situations like Dawson's, and we'll get that face when we're pushing him through the mall. We'll get that head tilt, and they're like, oh. I'm like, no. You don't understand. Like, it's not all. This is we are in awe of what God has done. Like, it's a blessing. We get a wheelchair for a 16-year-old kid, and the van we get to drive, we look so important in that thing. Like, it's FBI. It's all black. It's got blacked out windows. I mean, people think they're going to jail when we pull up to their house. Like, it's the best thing ever. But every day is a plus. It's not the time we've lost. That's how we started, just thinking, what have we lost? But every day is thinking, this is what God gave us. This is a blessing that we didn't have before. So when we hope for a child, we didn't realize that he would keep delivering on that prayer day after day after day after day after day.
Well, and isn't it something you guys have gotten involved with other trisomy 18 parents, if I'm remembering right, that this is now extended beyond your family to where you're actually involved with something on a much bigger scale. Am I remembering that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Renee and I are on the board of an organization known as SOFT. Soft.org is the website. You can check them out there. Trisomy.org. We have been a part of this organization since Dawson was about 4 years old, because there was a big transition for us to think about where, okay, now we just get past the days of where we're like, are we going to have tomorrow? And then we start thinking about tomorrow. And then it's like, okay. And so we get connected with this group, and we have been able to invest in relationships globally because of our relationship to the trisomy community. In fact, the leading geneticist in the world for trisomy 18 and 13 is a friend of ours. Like we text during football games, and the rooms that God has allowed us to be in, the influence that we've been able to have. Every year we do a conference, and because of COVID for the past couple of years, we haven't been able to do it in person. And so they for the past 2 years, they've asked me to deliver like the Sunday morning kind of final message of the week. And I said, well, I'm going to share about how I know and love Jesus and what he's done for me. They're like, we would love for you to do that.
Oh, that's amazing.
And so for the past couple of years, I've literally preached the gospel on a Sunday through Zoom to all over the world. If I was going to try to name I can't remember all the countries we were in. We were in China, we were in Amsterdam, we were in South America. Like it was almost every continent that we were able to share like this message of hope and really identify with, this is just our story. This is our story of how God really has intervened in our life, but everybody has a story. Everybody has that pain, that difficulty that they wonder, like, does God really care about this? And we were able to talk about that, to know like that God is with us, and how the gift of being dependent on him is just that. It's a gift.
Yes.
It's not a gift to be free of the worry for your own life. It's not a gift. That's a dependence on ourselves that we don't necessarily need, but the grace that we have through knowing Jesus personally.
Yes.
And so Renee and I were literally able to share this message worldwide. And I'm going, man, this redneck from South Carolina
that talks about barbecue all the time.
I'm a pastor, I'm an educated guy, but if you listen to me talk, you just are amazed that I can string a sentence together, right? This southern accent.
This is just
me.
One of many things that I miss about being able to hang out with you.
But every room I walk in, as soon as people hear me talk, I'm always over delivering their expectation, because it doesn't matter anything I can do to the good. They're like, man, we did not expect that from you. So, so God's really the blessing that we've had for our family. It's just been incredible, and watching our Dawson siblings grow up and how they care for him and how they love him. And all the kids in our family are adopted. Yeah. So when we we did this yesterday, we celebrated DJ's Gotcha Day. And it's a big deal. Sure. He wanted sushi, and he wanted, we're watching a movie together, and it was all about him. It was perfect. And one of our other kids was upset because it's like, when's my gotcha day? It's coming around, buddy. It's coming around. But the culture of our family is is such that everybody that's part of this family was brought into this family, even starting with Renee and I. Like, we chose one another.
Yes.
Then we also chose these children, like, one at a time. And, there's this painting that we had a friend of ours do for us. And it's a painting of a table, like a kitchen table. And there's all different kinds of chairs around the table. And underneath the painting, it says, "There's always a place for you." And that hangs up in our youngest daughter's bedroom.
Oh, that's beautiful.
And it's just amazing that to be able to understand that we get to, on this earth, deliver the same kind of grace and invitation to our family that God's given to us.
Yeah, that's amazing. Well, all right, Josh, you brought up something there that I want to tap you for here, Renee, in talking about these kids as siblings. I'm just curious, how has this odd bunch blended together?
I'm not sure we call it blend, but so I think Dawson's the one that kind of ties them all together. Our DJ and Dawson have always just had this connection, even to this day. If DJ walks into his room and he sees him, Dawson's going to light up. It's been that way since the beginning. Same thing with Carson and Huntley. Dawson just loves them all. Now, the two youngest ones, not so much. And I grew up, I was an only child. So all I had was cousins. And so, Josh's family had foster children, and then they had, 4 kids already. And so at one point I was like, Josh, do all kids do this? Or ours do they just fight? But I will say they go to bat for each other. Like at school, Carson, even though they'll fight here at home, if somebody is unkind to Huntley, they're like, dude, this is my sister. You need to watch it. So they blend well together. They have, every family has their days, even with biological children. But overall, it's really a gift that where they all have their own identity as far as, okay, my mom and dad, they love me. And one thing we say to the boys, and we're starting to say it with Huntley, is we'll say, I love you, bud. I love you. And they'll say, I love you back. And we'll say, I'm proud of you. And they'll say, I'm proud of you. DJ does that. And we'll say, why are we proud of you? And it's because you're our son, not because how good you did on a test grade, how good you did on anything else, just for being you and being our son. That's why we're proud of you. And so with them learning, they don't have to fight for that place in their family, or pecking order is what you do at school.
Sure.
They all have their own place, and we each have. It's kind of funny that the two medical kids are like, I say my kids, but they want to always kind of wane towards me. But DJ and Huntley, they're the mental kids. They kind of wane towards Josh. So it's kind of funny but all of them, even DJ at night, he hugs both of us. So I think they feel secure in who they are. I've always been very open with the boys and with Huntley Grace that, your birth moms loved you, and I've never been scared of that. And so I think it gives them a sense of safety to know, if I have these questions, if I have this. So I think with that part, it makes them more secure in who they are, and then in return makes them be each other's siblings. It doesn't matter if you don't have their blood that runs through. Y'all not all say y'all from different mamas, but you have a mama in me, you have a daddy and your dad that doesn't feel any different towards any of you,
right?
Separately. So,
and Renee, and DJ, now he's 14. He's beginning to develop relationships with his biological siblings.
Oh, interesting.
And so for Christmas, Renee, they just live, maybe half an hour from us. And DJ's birth mother was visiting here. She lives in another state now, but she was visiting here. And so their whole family got together, and DJ was there just visiting his adult sisters now, who have all their own children.
Oh, wow.
And, yesterday his birth mom was there. He got to see her and talk to her. It was one of the first times he did that, and he could remember, because she just hadn't been around as much. We've hung out with his sisters a lot more. And so we're posting about DJ's Gotcha Day yesterday, and they're some of the first ones to comment. We love you guys so much. And,
that's beautiful.
Be able to extend like our family, and so DJ knows, like, listen, buddy, this is part of who you are. And because it's part of who you are, we love that.
Right.
just like we love you. And we don't ever have to be afraid of your birth mom. We call it that. We call them their birth mom. Renee, with Carson's mom, we'll FaceTime. She's got a new baby now, and she's married, and she's raising her own family. And she was really young when Carson was born. And now Renee's encouraging her. I mean, her baby is beautiful, and it's just wonderful to see how her life is developing. It's been really cool to see how those relationships kind of develop over time. You know, Carson now is talking about his He said,
"Look at my beautiful half sister."
Yeah, look at my beautiful half sister is what he was saying. And DJ's sister had a baby last week, and we're like, "Look, DJ, you're an uncle." And he's like, "I'm an uncle." He was so excited.
I'm a proud uncle.
Sure. It was kind of funny. So, our family, like that idea of like there's always room is kind of how we live, you know.
And I think that's one of the sweetest spots of adoption for me, was that not only did I get to love on the kids that are now my children, but I get to love on the moms too. That was one spot that was really with Dawson's mom, with DJ's mom, with Carson's mom, all those. It was a really sweet relationship, to the point of like Maria. Dawson's mom was a given. Okay, I want to put Dawson up for adoption. I know that, but the other ones, they were trying to make the changes to be able to get their children back. But for them to come to a point, say, I feel so honored that they said, I trust you enough that if I sign the papers, will you adopt my kiddo? And to me, the weight of that, of getting to a point of saying, I know I can't take care of them, but I see that you love them like they're your own. Will you adopt them? And we're like, absolutely, you know. So I think even that is it's very cool to me to be able to have that relationship with them, not only with their biological children, and which is my child now, to have that come full circle. It brings, you know, when people say negative, like somebody said something negative to DJ here recently about adoption, that, you know, his mom didn't want him or whatever. I was able to say that is so far from the truth.
Yeah.
Your mom loved you. She cared for you so much that she wanted you to be taken care of. And that's the reason she chose adoption for you. So,
and then we could tell him, hey, remember, you were with her at Christmas.
Yeah.
What did she do when she saw you? He's like, oh, she was crying and so happy. We're like, exactly. Why? Because she loves you, buddy. Yeah. She loves you.
Well, and I'm so glad that my folks raised me with that mentality as well, that there was never anything disparaging said about my birth parents. And, you know, mine goes way back into the 60s. And so much of that stuff is still so locked down that it's hard to get any information. But I just appreciate that my folks came at it that way. That's just like, you have no idea how much your birth mother loved you so much to have taken this route, when it would have been very easy for her to have done away with that unexpected pregnancy. And I just love that you're instilling that in your kids. And with that, is it fair enough to say that even in all the medical challenges, that any of the challenges that you have dealt with from the beginning with each of these 4 beautiful children, that you can see God's fingerprints everywhere?
Man, fundamentally, I don't really know that, and we say this a lot, because when people hear our story, I think they automatically begin to think, oh man, you guys are such great people. And they might be right, but that's not really how we look at it. Like we would have never planned this.
Yeah.
In fact, if you think about, the family that adopted a bunch of kids, I mean, you automatically have visions in your mind of what those people might be like, you know, and I think we break all those norms, right? I don't think we fit the mold for like that kind of group. But when we look back in the rear view of the past 16 years of this journey through adoption, we can see with the gift of time exactly how God was moving us through this narrative in a way to bring him glory and honor. Like Dawson's life. Like, there's just a great example, Steve. Dawson's life. Why has God given him so much time? Well, I don't know. I don't know why, other than the fact that I know that God is love and he cares for us. Yeah. But God is also love and cares for our friends who was raising a little boy when the first time he had a seizure, he didn't survive it and passed away at 4 years old. He loves him too. Well, how we see this time is that God is doing something far beyond than we could think, we could imagine. Sure. And the imprint, as you kind of mentioned it, God's fingerprints on that is bringing him glory in a unique way through Dawson's life. I can't explain it. I know that a lot of what our trisomy community calls their angel children, a lot of those angel children, they bring glory to God in the same way. It's just in a different way. And so to be able to look back and to see, okay, God took us here so that we could experience this, and then he used this so we could then move on to this next thing. And then by the time this is over, we have a little child factory here that we're cranking these things. I'm worried to go to work, Steve, is what I'm trying to say. There's going to be another child here when I get back.
When you see Renee's number come up on your phone, you're like, oh my.
What are you doing? And they listen, I'm not kidding you. They call Renee. They call you and they're like, we've got children. And Renee's like, well, that's great. And we're going to let you go. And so we're full. Someone else should take up the mantle and start moving the ball forward on adopting some of these kids. We're full. And so, but how God has knit this together is it's amazing. I mean, we could have never. We weren't clever. We're not clever enough to be able to put that together.
Sure.
So it's wonderful. It really is.
Yeah. And Renee, since it's where we started, I have to ask. You go into marriage with a certain picture in your mind as to what things are going to look like moving forward. Yes, we're married now. Maybe we'll have a family someday, and you get that Norman Rockwell picture in your mind of what things are going to look like. Obviously, you've already touched on how you never would have thought it would go this way. But this far into it, would you have it any other way?
Absolutely not. I wouldn't give anything or trade anything for the journey. It's taught me stuff. It's taught me how these kids, there's so many out there even now that just don't have somebody that'll step in. And the love that I feel for my children, I couldn't love them more if I had given birth to them myself. Yeah. Infertility is a painful journey, and until you're on the other side of it and know that God can still meet those needs of your heart, to be the desires of your heart as being a mom, through adoption is a beautiful story. Sure. How a child could come through another womb that was completely capable and give that child to a mother that's womb didn't work, and you don't feel any different. Yeah. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I tell everybody that, it's been a hard journey. It waxes and wanes, but you know what? That journey is worth every tear, every blood, every sweat, anything. All the trips to therapy for each one of the kids. I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And we really appreciate, a couple of things. One, you taking the time to highlight this. To highlight adoption, because a lot of people talk about adoption like they talk about log cabins. Yes. It's like, I love log cabins. We're going to build a log cabin one day. I mean, everybody says at one point, I don't know, it's just here in the South, maybe it's a thing, but we want to build a log cabin, and one day we're going to adopt. And we tell people, it's not for everybody all the time, but most likely there'll be a time in your life that God has given you to where you can invest your time in a child who's got a difficult future. Yeah. And we just pray that you leverage what God's given you for the sake of the gospel in that child's heart and life.
As I was considering how to tell different stories of adoption, I knew that I had to have Josh and Renee on the show. To say that these people have large hearts would be a huge understatement. and to hear how God has given them new ways to reach out to people all over the world who are dealing with similar situations, like other parents who are raising kids with trisomy 18. That's just God doing what God does. He takes people with huge hearts and puts them in situations where he can say, "Oh, look at my kids. Watch what I can do through them." As we were wrapping up the conversation, Josh shared with me that March is Trisomy Awareness Month, which is very interesting with this episode releasing on March 14th. If you would like any information about that, there is a link in the show notes. And while you're there, you will also find links to the Nook Facebook page and my social media feeds if you'd like to follow along. There will be 2 more weeks of adoption stories coming before I take a very needed 1-month break. This podcast has been going non-stop since February of 2021, and I'm very much looking forward to a month where I can relax a little while planning for more content that I pray will continue to add value to your day. Thank you so much for listening today, and I will catch you here next time in the Nook.
The Nook Podcast is a production of Sozo Digital Media.